Hi everybody, I'm Joey Paul and I'm an indie author, and today I am doing a video for the Evergreen Writing Oasis writing retreat. I'm going to talk about writing disabilities and also brushing over some self-care because we all need that. So this video is going to be split into two categories: the writing disabilities and then the self-care category. So starting with writing disabilities, I've talked about this before. I've talked about how we need to be all more inclusive, and I know that a lot of the videos part of this retreat are talking about similar things, but when we talk about diversity, I'm only going to focus on disabilities because I'm white, and although I am part of the LGBTQ rainbow, that's not what this topic is about. So yeah. Writing disabilities is something that you can approach from a variety of standpoints. You can do it as someone with a disability writing about another disability that you don't have, or you can do it as someone who knows someone with a disability writing about that disability, or you can be someone who knows no one with disabilities and write about disability. The point is that if you want to write about characters with a disability, then it's really simple to do. You just basically find the disability that you want, you do some research, and then you employ sensitivity readers. Now that sounds really easy, and it is kind of, but there are steps in between. Once you're finding out this disability, then you can choose from a wide array. There are so many disabilities out there. Some that some people feel aren't disabilities, things like autism, which really depends on the person. Some people will feel that it's not a disability, it's part of who they are and therefore should not be counted. And I'm not autistic, so I can't comment on that. There are some people with chronic illnesses who will see what they have as a disability, but there are others who won't. And it really is dependent on that character that you're writing as to where they fall on that. Personally, I felt I was disabled from, I was born with a lung condition. I never felt I was disabled in my childhood, and then I got sicker at 19 and then I needed a wheelchair, so that's really what kick-started the whole I'm disabled thing to me. Even though I was or could have called myself disabled in the years before that, I just didn't, because of the upbringing I had and because of the idea that to be disabled you had to be in a wheelchair, which is one that a lot of people have, and I guess a lot of people think that wheelchair therefore disabled, and they also have this kind of like thought of wheelchair obviously paralyzed, obviously disabled, and that's not the only kind of reason for a wheelchair there is. Personally, I can walk a few steps, I can transfer from my wheelchair to my bed or to another chair or whatever. I just can't walk long distance, as in long distance for me is more than a few steps, which I guess is not long distance for most people. But if you were to write a character that is struggling with not knowing whether they are disabled or not, that's actually a really relatable experience that a lot of people with chronic illness have, is knowing when they sort of like go from being just chronically ill to disabled, and they kind of, it's something that I see a lot. I get asked a lot, you know, am I disabled enough? And it's like, only you can decide that. Only you can say, yes, I'm disabled enough. And I really am not too keen on the whole idea of gatekeepers in the disabled community, but I'm getting off topic. But anyway, when writing a character with disability, if you want them to have that kind of unsurety as to whether or not they can call themselves disabled, and I have read good books about this. One is Sick Kids in Love by Hannah Moskowitz. I talked about that in a previous video, and she basically had two characters, one that was a lot more disabled and another that was sort of like trying to cope even though they really were disabled, and it was a really good book. So once you've decided that you've got this character and you've got this disability, what do you need to do to make sure that you're presenting the best side of things? Because the last thing you want to do is go into falling into that stereotype trap of either we're all cured or we'll all die or we're all bitter and twisted and we never find love, which, you know, is just, do I really need to explain? I don't think I do. Once you've got to that decision, then I guess the next step is a lot of research. And the research will depend on what kind of disability you have. Like if you've got a chronic illness, then you need to speak to people who have that chronic illness. But the same can be said for a disability that's not a chronic illness. You should be talking to people with that disability. And again, I'm just going to reiterate, I talked about this in my revisiting diversity video, which I will link up in the cards, but not everybody in that community is going to be willing to talk to you, and that's okay. That's their right, that's their prerogative. Personally, I'm happy to talk about my disability, and I'm happy to talk about the ableist on my face, and I'm happy to talk about how to help people write characters like me, but not everybody is, and that's okay. So when you approach someone, even if they're your friend, don't just assume that because they're your friend, they're going to tell you absolutely everything you did wrong and absolutely everything you did right. They can say no, and that's okay. One thing I will say for writing disabilities is that you need to do a ton of research. And when I say a ton, I'm not going to give you an arbitrary number of how much research you should do. It really just depends on the disability. And part of that is because it depends on your character as well. If your character is someone with a chronic illness, then it depends how severe that chronic illness is. It depends whether it's going through a flare or not. If your character is someone with a long-term disability, then it depends again on how severe that disability is, about whether or not they have blips or flares or anything else like that. And if it's just a disability that stays the same, then again it depends on where your character is, because it's not just about the physical symptoms, it's about the mental journey they go through as well. Because I know that I really struggle sometimes with being disabled, or I did more so when I first became needing a wheelchair, and it really does depend. There are good days and bad days, and mental health is tied into this as well, because some people with mental health problems also have physical health problems, and it's really common. It really does depend on the character, and I can't give you a sort of like step-by-step guide, because it depends on the person you're writing, what they're going through, why they feel that way, etc., etc. There is no blueprint for writing disabilities, just like there's no blueprint for writing anything else. It's basically how it is. So once you've done your research and you've talked to people, then it really is about making sure that what you portray is both the character you want to portray and that it's a positive limelight. And when I say positive limelight, I don't mean that they can't have flaws or be an arsehole or anything else like that. I just mean that there are too many books that talk about representation, and the representation is stereotypical or tropey, and it's just can we stop doing this, please? And it's, you know, so when I say positive limelight, I mean you're here to learn, you're here to want to know more, and in doing so I'm talking about basically those people who want to provide positive representation rather than just a random representation that turns out to be the same as everything else. So writing people with disabilities or writing characters with disabilities is you need to identify the disability, you need to do your research from it, you need to decide on where the character falls in that spectrum, because as I said, it is a spectrum. I have certain chronic conditions and I know people who have the same chronic conditions, but we also have different experiences, and a lot of that is going to come down to when you write and when you put the characters through situations. But other parts of it are going to come down to basically deciding whether or not you want this condition to flare or do this or do that or do the other. And also, I've said this before, but you really need to employ sensitivity readers. It's just something that's needed. Personally, I do employ sensitivity readers for characters, even if they're disabled, characters that don't share my conditions, because disabled people are not monolith and there's only so much research you can do. Research is a great tool, but it can't give you those little everyday quirks or those microaggressions or those things that maybe I wouldn't think about because I've been disabled for as long as I have, but somebody newly disabled would, or somebody younger would. And so yeah, I do employ sensitivity readers because it really is something that I want to do right. So that's all I'm going to say about writing characters with disabilities. So let's move on to part 2, which is self-care. Self-care for me is basically reading, having a nap, chatting with a friend, watching Netflix, and occasionally self-care is writing something that's not my works in progress, which may sound like contradictory because writing is kind of like why I need the self-care, but sometimes it can be good self-care to just let yourself write something that's not work as such. Personally, with the reading the book, I go through so many books in a year. I think I'm at something like 150 at the moment. I had to up my goodie challenge again to 300 because I was getting ahead by ridiculous amounts, and this is the most I will read in a year ever. But yeah, So I read books and I lose myself in other people's worlds, and I'm one of these people that can pretty much read anything. You know, I love crime mystery, that's basically where my heart lies. I love most young adult. I'm not too big on fantasy. At least I'm not too big on epic fantasy. I can't bring myself to enjoy learning about all these different creatures and races and stuff like that, and it makes it hard for me to, it feels like work basically. So I don't enjoy it as much. I will read it from time to time, and I have read some that I have really enjoyed, but it doesn't appeal to me as much as the other genres do. So I read, even though like crime mystery is my go-to genre, I will read pretty much anything, as you will have seen from my Goodreads. And I'm going through a crime mystery kick at the moment. I read Tamara Woods' books and they were awesome, so I highly recommend those. And I also have been reading some other indie authors' young adult books, and they are just really, really good. And so yeah, those have been really enjoyable reads for me, and it's a great way for me to unwind after a day, and just sit there and get lost in a book. And napping is a great way to self-care, especially if you're kind of frayed at the edges already. That's a great way to self-care. I do this most days. Simply part of it is my chronic condition, and part of it is sometimes, you know, you just need to nap and shut the world off and just have moments to yourself, and that's not a bad thing. And then what else did I say? Chatting with a friend. I have a small circle of like friends that I talk to daily, and one of them is B, who lives with me, so of course I talk to her daily. And then one of them is my friend Kim, and so we chat just basically most of the day, back and forth, and she's doing this and I'm doing that, and it's nice to just exist in that space. And so what else do I do? Watch Netflix. That's rarer for me because generally part of my issues in needing self-care is because I get brain fog and I get sort of like very about after a day. So watching a TV show requires more brain power, so it's not as much a relaxing thing for me, but at the same time it is something that I enjoy from time to time. So I do have shows that I need to catch up on, and I haven't yet. Like, I haven't seen the end of The Good Place, don't spoil me. I need to watch those. And then writing something that's not my works in progress, that's not my books. I find that can sometimes both refill my creative well, but also give me a break from the stringent rules of writing. Like, I know that when I'm creating, like the two books I'm writing at the moment, they're both sort of like urban fantasy, paranormal mystery, depending on where you swing. And I'm creating worlds at the same time, and it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of brain power. And getting to write something that's completely my rules, my decision, doesn't matter what the world does, because it's not ever being published. And because it's not ever being published, I can make mistakes. I can have the world do this in one bit and do something that's completely contradictory in the next, because there are no rules. So that is a great way for me to sort of like refill the creative well, but also a lot of steam, like work through things. And that's been really, really helpful. Other parts of self-care, for me, like I know people talk about going for a walk. I can't go for a walk at the moment because I'm still under shielding because of the plague. But I did enjoy occasionally going out for a wheel, but never too far. But yeah, at the same time, it's just self-care is such a big thing, and it's something that I should do more of. But I really struggle with finding things that I could both do and that work for me. Like I will occasionally play games on my phone, either word puzzles or just puzzles. And they really kind of like help, and I sort of get caught up in those, and that's always really fun. And I can lose a good few hours doing that. But it's also a way of sort of like laying down my hair and getting on with the day and enjoying myself and just letting go and having some time just to myself. So those are something I do. And basically, yeah, I think that's all that I can think of for self-care. It's not a topic that I'm expert in. I do try and practice at least some kind of self-care every day because I write most days, and so I want to be able to not burn out. And so part of that practicing self-care is finding new things, like, you know, playing with my cats and reading a book and playing on my phone and all the rest of it. It all depends from day to day, because some days you're going to feel like this is the perfect thing and other days you're going to feel like this is the perfect thing. So yeah, so there we go. I want to thank Tamara Woods, Cara Brown, Diana Collin and Cachet Warren for inviting me to be part of this writing retreat, and I really hope that this was helpful. If you've got any questions, let me know down in the comments below, and don't forget to check out the playlist for the complimentary videos, which I will link up above and down below, and all the other elements of this weekend, which are just going to be amazing. So please do check them out. I will link as much of it as I can down below. So that's all I've got time for today. If you want to support my channel, you can comment, like or subscribe. I post new videos on Thursdays, and you can find me all over social media, and my books are available everywhere. And don't forget to pre-order Cramping Chronicles: The First Twinge, and if you do pre-order, don't forget to grab the swag, all the links to which are listed below. Thanks for watching, and remember to keep writing. Bye.